What's going on? Welcome back to another video. Glad to have you here. We're doing something a little bit different today. Usually, if you've seen any of the videos on this channel, it's usually just me talking to the camera, AKA talking to you all on whatever topic that is the topic for the week. But this time I'm actually repurposing a phone call, and we've talked about content repurposing even recently on this channel. Repurposing a call with my buddy, Mitch Wilder. This guy is a seasoned veteran when it comes to the paid advertising space within marketing, and he's built a very successful business in that and actually has moved into the M&A space, which is merger and acquisitions. He basically looks for businesses to buy into and help them get better at what they're doing. And he's got a lot of skill in the realm of entrepreneurship, even solopreneurship, those smaller businesses. We talk about paid ads versus organic content and the pros and cons of either. We talk about the importance of your network and looking at your audience as the most valuable asset for your business. We talk about why building real connections is the secret sauce to success and a ton more. This is an episode that I think you're really gonna like. So make sure you stick around for the whole thing and let me know if you like this kind of content so that I can continue to bring you more of what you're looking for. All right, let's go. But I think where we really both have a lot of interest is in kind of consistent content creation and trying to leverage content in our businesses, because we have a different aim, with what you're doing with your business and what I'm doing with mine. Like there's not really an overlap as far as the objective of the business and the value that's provided. But that's what I think is really cool about just talking on organic content strategy, what works, what doesn't, good ways to do it, fails, things that are being done wrong, that are short-sighted maybe, because that spans all business.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I don't think that there's anybody that's exempt from the potential value that lies within good organic content production and distribution.
I'm 100% in agreement. I mean, to say that I'm fascinated by content is just an understatement. I mean, it is, I'll tell you a couple experiences that I had around this, because I think, I'm a pretty transparent guy on things. And, I think I told you before, like my background was that I ran, a online paid advertising agency for about 12 years. Now, the reason that I left that was just because I just don't, it's not that I think that like agencies are bad or anything like that. That's not the case. I think that the model, if you want to be a 7-figure entrepreneur, like the model is, there are easier models to get there than the agency. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
So that's why I left it. And the other thing about it is it's a highly paid job, right? You're in the business. When I was single and didn't have kids, I worked 80 to 90 hours a week. And when I had, got married and had kids, then I started cutting it back, but it was like still 40 to 60, which is just a job. It's just you have a job and you make good money, but it was just not what I was looking to do. And so, but anyway, you were talking about some of the things with like landing pages, and the reason for that is because when you're spending $100,000 on a campaign that's going to a single landing page, you got to make sure it's working. And even if you didn't touch the page, right? If you're the advertiser and you're running the ads to the page, if it doesn't convert, you get the blame, right?
Find that happen a lot in your experience where you would be running, the paid media side of things. You'd be pushing all this traffic over, but their conversions were just shabby. They weren't very great. It puts you kind of in a rock and a hard place. Like, what do you do in that situation? It's like, hey, it's the other guy.
Yeah, early on when we were like kind of a jack of all trades type agency and we're doing more, it would put us in an awkward position. We repositioned ourselves in the agency differently. Like at first it was like, we were in the middle. The way I see it is like you can solve small problems for a lot of people, right? And have a very profitable company, or you can solve big problems for a few people that can afford to pay for them, and you can have a really profitable company. Initially in the agency, like we were in the in-between, and that's not a way to make money. So when we were in that position, we did run into from a client and them not taking our advice. What's hard is like with the agency model is you are working for somebody, right? And it's hard to position the fear is I tell them something they don't want to hear, they get upset at me, and then they fire me. But the thing to realize is, like, if you don't say something and they don't get results, then they fire you anyway, right?
Yeah.
And most people take the first approach because they're like, well, I just won't say anything and then I'll keep them longer. And so, as we shifted and said like, hey, we're not going to work on small ad spend accounts, and our specialty in the agency became on scaling. Like, so people would come to us when they're like, we're spending 15 to 25,000 a month in ad spend, and like every time we try to scale, profitable campaigns become unprofitable. That was the specific niche context that they would come to us in. And so we had to reposition ourselves. Like, one thing is like every agency is like, okay, and the clients expect it. They're like, okay, this all sounds great. Send us a proposal. Well, most agencies would be like, okay, yep, we'll do that. So you now as an agency are going in and you're doing work, putting together a proposal for free. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? So when they would say to us, before they were a client, they would say, hey, send us a proposal. My response, or whoever was talking to them, the response was always, we don't send proposals. And then it's like,
and what was the kickback on that?
Wait, what?
Like, how did that conversation go? Yeah.
So it was always like a stumble. Like, they would stumble and they'd be like, oh, and I'd say, well, we don't send proposals because ultimately, if you hire us to do this type of work in your business, you want people who are advising you in ways to run your business. So do you really want to take advice from somebody who's in a practice of working for free in their business?
Right.
Right.
And they're the caliber of that business.
Yeah.
It kind of shows like the business maturity and just awareness of the bigger thing that's going on. And obviously in an example like this, that would be potentially a red flag, or we could at least say it's a strong indicator towards potentially how the rest of that. It's kind of like I just heard somebody talk about, it was like on Instagram or something, and it was about why like these high level business executives always like to take like potential clients out onto the golf course, or like before they work with somebody, they'll play 18 holes or something like that with them. And if they cheat at all, if they move the ball at all, no business.
That's interesting.
Because how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yes. Yep.
And I think in a lot of ways it's true. I'm sure you could probably poke some holes in that. But I think as an overall like fundamentals type of statement, I think it's closer towards like ultimate truth than it is just like some fun statement that's catchy and pithy,
Yeah, no, I would agree with it. I would agree with it because like even the positioning, like when it would go the other way and they're like, well, everybody sends a, proposal,
Yeah.
My response would be like, well, hey, if you're getting proposals, you're obviously shopping agencies. People do that all the time. Why don't you choose one of them to work with? And then if they can't get you the results you're looking for, then come back and we can talk.
Sure. Now, would you give them outside of a proposal, would you like, I'm sure there would be some sort of kind of like discovery call, I guess, or something where they can get a better take of like how you guys operate. And yes, you're left of center as far as what everybody else is doing, but here's why, and they can start to pick up. So it's not like you're just like, hey, we're not sending a proposal and, take it or leave it. Like you had a different approach to that.
We would do a discovery call and we would then lead that into an account audit. And then we would do a call to review the audit. So the discovery call would get us at, if they were interested, we would do an audit on the account, which was private. Like we would do that. And then we would produce results of the audit and review them together, but we had to review them on a call, right? So it was like, we have a 1-page bullet list of like, these are the things holding you back from scale. And, they had to like, they wouldn't, if they were like, hey, send us the audit and then, we'll review it and then we'll book a call. It's like,
right.
It's just, so we trained them early on to basically work within our systems, which were outside of the box and weird, from an agency perspective, but we used it to our advantage. I never, ever could sell off of a proposal because, you're just putting yourself in a pile of, these people that it's like, if you put yourself in a pile of 3 agencies, a lot of it comes down to who has the prettier proposal. Because, a lot of these proposals are 10, 15 pages and there's design elements to it. The executives at companies are not actually reading them.
Right. And even if they try to, in a lot of sense, they don't really know what's in there because that's not their primary thing. That's not what they spend time in every day. So it becomes like whichever thing in the filing cabinet is the sexiest, what catches your eye.
Yeah.
But hey, that even speaks just to like consumer psychology in general, because you can absolutely use that to your advantage without, obviously there's a lot of like hate on like clickbait type stuff. Like, oh, you got me hooked by saying that. Well, there's a difference between clickbaiting when they go in and then you don't deliver on the promise or the curiosity that you sparked from the get. But yeah, it really goes into just consumer psychology in general. Like, how do people make decisions? Because this is true in life, in business. And for those, whether agency model, whatever the business may be, I feel like if you can aim to incorporate the psychological component of how we make decisions, of how we communicate, like in real time, like we match each other's body language in a lot of sense. And, you know, there's a lot of different nuances, but I think if all businesses, the more they pay attention to that, the more that they can start to see what actually does cause the conversion inside somebody's mind before they actually then submit, you know, their first deposit or sign the contract or whatever it may be. Very interesting. Hey, real quick, I've done a bunch of research on what helps podcasts like this grow, and the data continues to prove that this one thing can make or break your show, and that is audience engagement. So I have one small ask that requires almost nothing from you, but would mean everything to me if you could do the following. If you're watching this on YouTube, please tap the like button and then subscribe to the channel. And no, because you subscribed doesn't mean that I'm gonna blow up your feed from now on. But if you're catching this episode on your favorite podcast streaming, on a different podcast streaming app, be sure to rate the show from your device and consider following the show as well. Those quick actions take about 3 seconds, and it directly supports this content and my business. All done with it? Awesome. Let's jump back into the show.
Yeah. It was fun to watch. I'll tell you one experience, and then I want to tell you what really got me interested in content. So interested in content. But this was early on in my advertising career. This is before I merged with the agency that eventually became partners and we scaled together. But what I used to do is I used to offer the full stack, right? Websites, funnel, the whole thing. And this was back before that was even popular, right? And I realized that like the number one thing that I was, getting people inquiring about was ads. And so I was like, why am I like, the better strategy would be for me to, even though websites were like 80% of my work, I cut off websites because I realized that if I did that, I could reach out to website agencies because I knew that their clients were all asking about ads.
Right.
And I would offer the ads to them, and then I would get referrals. And that was kind of my big break of like, I went from spending very little in ads, but doing it well, to spending, 6 figures a month in ads in about 6 months, Yeah. And so in that time period, there was this one web development agency that I started partnering with, and they were bringing me in as like a referral partner to their clients. So we're in it's a retirement community. It was a local retirement community. And it was like the biggest one in our area, a really well-known place. So I'm in there with their executives. And I'm young and less gray at the time, and looked young and less gray.
You look young, man. Come on now.
I appreciate it. It's the gray, man. It's the gray.
You do. I like the gray, man. That's the trend too. You're riding the wave. People are into that.
When I say I look like I was like 15 years old. So
okay, so very young.
I looked much younger. Yeah.
Okay. You showed up to your meeting on a skateboard.
Pretty much. So I'm in this meeting, and they pulled I'm in there with the executives of this, assisted living retirement community who are all older. And I'm in there with the web developer they're already his client, and he brought me in. And so they're asking me all these questions. They're drilling me with all these questions, and I'm just answering their questions, and we're just going through. And they said, well, we've had some people that we've hired to do ads for us, and it didn't work out. And so what we would like to do is we can tell what you're doing. We want to work with you. What we would like to do is we would like to basically have you start with us, have you work with us, but we want it to be on a performance basis. And if the ads work, then we can move into a commission or retainer or something like that. I said, okay. I said, well, for us to make that work, then I'd have to be able to guarantee that the ads work, right? And they're like, right. Yes. And I was like, okay, well then in that case, I'd need a really good offer. And they're like, okay, well, what do you have in mind? I was like, well, how about this? I was like, what if we run an ad with an offer that says, if you bring your loved one in, your mom or your dad in here, we guarantee that they will not get sick or die for 12 months. And they're like, we can't do that. You know,
Right.
I said, but that's what you're asking me to do.
Right.
I said, you're asking me to guarantee the outcome of this campaign without me having the influence or control over the variables that make it so I can guarantee that campaign.
Right.
So the one guy goes, okay, so what's the monthly retainer again?
Yeah.
Signed him up.
Nice.
But the web developer that brought me in is over there going,
Just like, don't screw me over, man. I was talking you up.
And we leave. I think we rode together there. I didn't even remember this part, but we left. He goes, I cannot believe you said that. I'm just glad you could pull it off.
Yeah, man. It's so true. It's so true. I mean, that is one thing, like in the paid ad space, like you are kind of caught between two things that you can't specifically control when you work a very narrow lane as far as your scope and what your role is within the whole, buyer's journey, right?
Yeah.
But because the money is spent a lot on the ads, plus you've got your markup for your own cost, so you can run a good business there. Like your clients are paying attention to that very closely.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if it was anything else, I mean, if I was taking that money and putting it into the stock market, I'd be heavily regulated. It's not really different, right? An investor takes money and they put it into the market and they have to have a license. And the reason they do that is they hope to get a return. They're regulated. I take somebody's money, put it into ads, hoping to get a return. It's not really that much different. Right. Except the difference is we were not regulated.
And there's so many con artists. There's so many just fail stories in that space on top of the fact that most people that you're going to have these conversations with that you potentially want to sign up as a new client, they don't really know left from right when it comes to ads. They don't understand how you set up the campaign itself, how the offer must be structured and worded in a specific way. Then you've got the creative elements. Then you've got your split testing so that you can start pushing your top performers up. I mean, it makes people's heads start to spin. And I don't know, I guess you could look at this from both angles, but in a lot of sense, people become like when they're spending a lot of money on an area that they know could be really successful for them, but they don't know much about it. And there's also a bunch of horror stories. It makes for a really hard sell, I'd imagine. That's one reason why I've stayed really far away from that, because I have kicked around the idea like, well, let me self-study. I'll run some paid ads for myself, try to build brand for myself, grow some audience through that. And then what I learn in that process, maybe I could spin that into like a add-on service that I could provide. Now I'm not mulling that over anymore. That's just not the direction I'm going.
You're like, I've very much changed my mind on that.
Very much. Yeah. But I mean, and that's why, the people that are in that space that do it well, they rise to the top pretty quick and they can really dominate the market, it seems like. So then what was your journey from the paid space into this new like light bulb of a whole new world kind of thing of organic and content specifically on that side? What was the transition for you?
It happened a bit over time. Like I was always attracted to the paid advertising because I was somewhat impatient. Like some of it was that I liked the fact that I could say, hey, I'm going to... So we had this thing in the agency where we would guarantee ads. We did get to a point where we could guarantee ads. It was very unique. We found a way to make it so that like 99.9% of our first campaigns, not like split testing multiple ads, first campaigns would get the results they wanted. So if they wanted leads, 99.9% of the tens of thousands of campaigns that we built would get leads on the first attempt. Now, they might be more expensive than what they wanted. Yeah, we baked that into the offer. Like if they did not get that, they didn't pay until they did, right? Yeah, so it was very, risk reversal type situation. However, what I started, so like kind of the long process and the long realization was that I realized that the people who got the best results with their ads were either also doing organic simultaneously. So like they'd bring us in to do the ads and then they had an internal team that was doing organic stuff, even if it was just SEO. And then the other one that was like, they had it before, right? They were like, we started with organic and now we want to move into paid ads.
Sure.
Much, much higher success rate of them, getting ads to work consistently, scalably, etc. The one that hit me between the eyes as far as content goes is there was this one company that we were working with, and when we ran the agency, we had the other unique thing about us is like most agencies keep clients for 3, 6, or 12 months. And that's because that's how long their contract is. And so they have a really high turnover. Our average client retention was 3.5 years with no contract, right?
Wow.
So we had really good retention. And the reason for that was because when I worked with a company, they came in for the advertising service. But what we actually did is like I would meet, because we were dealing with companies at scale. So I would do a 30-minute meeting each week with each company that we had where I was basically acting as like a fractional CMO.
Sure.
So they came for the agency service, but they stayed for the advice in all the other areas of their business because marketing touches everything.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
they knew that this was the free add-on and that if they left, they weren't getting it anywhere else, Yeah. And so the content part of that came in when there was this one. So before I exited my agency, there was like one last client that I took on as I was going through that transition out of the agency. And I would give them the advice and I would get pushback on everything, right? And it was just a little bit different. And I was like, this is really weird. Like it's a weird situation because my hands are very tied and I'm being very limited, but they're expecting a lot more. And what was weird about it is I'd present them like, hey, this is what the ads did. And it was like, your first week, running ads to the webinar, we made, 12,000 for the first week, which paid for the ads in our agency services. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that's all right. Let's see if we can do a little better next week. I'm like, okay,
like,
do a little better next week.
If you're that good on week 1, then performance.
Yeah. And it was like that. And I mean, they were with us for 2.5 years. Right. And every week I improved it, but
there's
it was like
pressure that comes with that. Like there's a little bit of sweat kind of dropping down your brow from time to time because you're like, well, and then it
was weird.
In some sense, it doesn't make you want to do better so that you had something in the chamber for the next month. Dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. In my own way, I've experienced that as an email marketing freelancer.
Yeah.
Because, that's what I was doing too. Like and I think maybe that's a key takeaway here is like, obviously we all know like deliver more than what you promise, like over deliver. An easy way, especially for solo operators or people running like a micro agency where their hands are in it pretty deep, like giving your 2 cents, your skill set and your expertise in the areas that immediately surround the thing that you were hired for makes you invaluable. Even though that's not a line item on on the invoice, if you're able to bring that they trace that back to your expertise and the character of you as an individual. And therefore, whatever brand you choose to be a part of or spin up in the future, you still carry that reputation with you in a positive light. And that's one way to be hyper successful in the thing that you're doing in the moment, but also prime for great future and a network, that Rolodex of people when you want to spin up a new business and you need to kind of hit everybody and let them know where you're at, what you're doing, and see if you can, work something up or see if they know somebody that you could start to work with and this, that, and the other. Yeah, it's the same thing because like a lot of my testimonials when I would finally towards the end of a client contract, when I knew that we weren't going to be re-upping, I was like, hey, I'd really love, like the testimony would mean a lot, and just really just ask for it. And most of the time, the thing that they highlighted in the testimonial had less to do with the service that I was selling, which was just email marketing management, some of the copywriting, automation building, all of that good stuff. And it was about Evan had creative solutions to problems I've had for a long time, and we were able to leverage his email to help with that. But he was friendly, kind. He looked at it from my perspective as the person that had to, pay the bills and write the checks and build this brand, and so we were able to collaborate and went way beyond the scope of what I had initially hired for. And obviously that just makes you feel as a service provider. I mean, talk about fulfillment and like just pride, and you're just like, man, that's cool. But then I was almost like, can you talk more about like how good I was at email? Because that's what I'm going to try to pitch to the next person.
They're like, we didn't actually think you were that good. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Well, that might have been true. That might have been true. My email guy that sucks at email, but he's good at brainstorming.
This I just put up, like, it's just a note from a client, you know, and it's, I love stuff like that. it's just, it makes you, appreciation, I think, goes a lot further, toward people like us who, we don't need anybody to motivate us with what we do. Like, we just want to do a good job. And that's why with this client, I was like, this is so weird. And I think it was at a point where I want to say we had done just north or just south of like $500,000 in sales for them from ads. And it was just like, malaise. It was just like, oh, okay. Well, I finally had a conversation with him just straightforwardly. And I was like, I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, I'm a pretty confident guy. I was like, every week when we talk, like, I'm pretty sure that you're going to cancel and not work the next week. I was like, I don't understand. And he's like, oh no, we love working with you. He's like, you do a great job and, you get great results. I'm like, okay, then what gives, Yeah, what gives? He goes, well, he's like, and this was the point for me. This was the big aha of like, what, is he goes, no, he said, it's just that we're trying to get the paid ads to match or beat our organic. And I was like, okay, how far off are we? He's like, organic does about 4 times more than our ads.
Whoa.
And I was like, really?
Yeah. And what's their cost?
Nothing. I mean, these guys were doing a daily YouTube video, and and what they would do is, it was not like they were even edited. They would pull one of their guys from, one of their employees, and they would have them do a video about what they did that day. Right. And I mean, it was just, they had hundreds of thousands, nearly 1 million subscribers. And I knew about it. Like, I knew that they had those assets and we used some of those in their marketing, but it was like, this is pretty intense. Like, the types of results that they get from just organic. And at that point, I kind of, when he told me that, I was like, okay, I'm humbled. Tell me what I don't know,
Right.
And that's what I think kind of set me down that path is, I mean, ultimately when I look at, I rarely share this publicly, and it's because I don't even have access to the accounts anymore. And I have screenshots of a few big accounts, but I don't have like, here's our history of spend. We did somewhere around like 50 million in spend on ads and drove somewhere around 200 million in sales. I usually publicly say like 30 million because for some reason, if I say 30 million, people are like, oh, okay. But if I say 50, they're like, prove it. I'm like, I don't have the proof anymore. I can show you a couple accounts. Yeah. And I can, if you really want it, like, I can refer you to a couple people that I spent it and you can ask them, but it was interesting to me because when I did the math of it, was like, okay, so the companies that we have done this for, right? They've made somewhere around 200 million. We've paid somewhere around 50 to, mostly at the time, because it was the most popular, Facebook, and some to Google.
Right.
And like, I looked at what my share of that was, which over that time period was, I don't want to say like only a few million, but the company, only made a few million for doing all that. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was like, that's kind of a raw deal. Right. And that's where it hit me. I was like, if I can learn organic and go down this path of organic and how that works, then I can be the one that at least is getting the media for the 50 million. Or if I go into, which is what I transitioned into, was if I go from, like, I can be the media company, so I can be the agency and I can make 5 to 7 million. I can be the media company and I can make 50 million. Or I can acquire the companies and be the owner of the companies and make the 200 million. And that was the balance. Not that's exactly how my future I intend for things to work, but it was just interesting to me, that realization of, the agency puts in the most work for the least amount of return, and the media company has the attention, and the company ultimately is the one that reaps the reward. Right. Where's the most leverage,
Well, and too, like with paid, it's one of those things where it's only working if you have the campaign turned on. Mm-hmm. And the only way to have a campaign turned on is to commit your dollars on the front end and just hope and pray that, it's going to work the way that you anticipate it to. But things change all the time. Now, granted, on the organic side, when we talk algorithms and best practices and things like that, it changes, new features, old things that they're removing, all of that. But like with organic, you hit upload, you hit post, and the feeds are cluttered with a lot of content. and most of it's pretty crummy, or it could be better. We'll
completely AI generated.
Yeah, there's a million different ways that it's being done wrong, but there's still plenty of good content out there. But the fact is, especially if you're strategic with what content you choose to create and distribute, because a lot of it can have quite an evergreen nature to it. Once you hit post, it's there. It exists forever. That YouTube URL can pop up and really help somebody even 10, 15 years down the pipe, and all along that time, it can be doing its thing. And especially when you start putting some clever marketing on the front end to just make sure that you're driving some eyeballs towards it. Now, it's hard when you're a new account, when you don't have a pre-built audience. And so, it gets scrappy in the low ranks as far as just the small numbers, and it's very hard to break through internally as a creator, as somebody that wants to produce more content, whether for themselves or on behalf of a brand. That's tough, but organic, there's no on-off switch. It's just the commitment and the balls to hit post, the willingness to stand beside what you claim to say in whatever video or whatever thread, or whatever reply you have to somebody else's content. So yeah, that's one thing that's like a huge major difference, is there's definitely no guarantee like on either side. You just never know. But the reps that you put in, just kind of like with anything, you're building the confidence of hitting upload on top of stacking the skills of learning what works best, whether it's best practices per platform, the core topics that your audience seems to care the most about. There's a lot of skills to stack and a lot of data that can be collected from that. And it's an infinite game. There's no finish line. But the beauty too, what I really like too, I know. Something that's just really smart is just the idea of like, hey, so okay, maybe you do like a series of 5 different topics on like how to build like a successful ad agency in modern day. Maybe that's like the topic and there's 5 subtopics and you have 5 videos within those. So you're looking at 25 videos. You put them all up, free, organic, YouTube, they're working in the search engine there. You can distribute it over on your X platform, wherever else you post, all of that stuff. But then you start to see like that one of those subtopics is popping, and that seems to be like the golden goose out of everything you made. Not only is that going to steer you towards what you should double down on, triple down on future content creation, but then you can take that and you can just package it as a digital product. Now you can start putting some sort of paywall, and it's very easy. We could jam on this too a little bit too, but what is it that they say? It's not really necessarily when you charge for like a digital course, for instance, it's not so much about the information that's in the course, it's the packaging of the information. It's the fact that you took out the friction for the learner. You made it all right there in one spot so they can open up one tab on their browser and have all the stuff that they need to learn, as opposed to sorting through 50 different blogs, reading all the top accounts all the time on X, like when they talk about topic A, B, or C, so I think it's kind of interesting too, like organic then. And of course, like you were mentioning, you can take that content and you can run ads on it. You can let the organic thing do its thing, like the content built to just sit there, serve an audience, and then you can throw some money behind it, maybe a little bit more intelligently than just hitting like boost post.
Right. Please don't do that. But please don't do that. But better than nothing. But no, and that's. I think what's interesting. There's a couple things that this path that I've been on building an audience. One thing I'll say is like, of everything that I've done in business, building an audience is by far the hardest, especially when you tie it to a personal brand specifically. Like I've built brands with no face. They're small fish in a small pond type brands, Sure. They became a big fish in a small pond type thing.
Said.
But I had another analogy that I don't think was politically correct that I'm trying to stop using. So, but there's, the thing about it is like, it is one of the hardest things I've ever done, as I think I've told you, like from the agency, I transitioned from agency into business acquisition. That was actually really surprisingly simple. I had some experience like using it when I was running the agency and had done some things like on the side with it. So I had a little bit of experience, and the transition was surprisingly easy. Like I made a declaration to my wife that I was like, that could be a whole nother discussion, but I was like, I'm done with the agency. Like this is not what's best for our family. And she's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go into M&A. That's what I've wanted to do for years, you know? And from that period to like my first acquisition was maybe a month and a half, 2 months, you know?
Wow.
And it was really, it really jumped in. And it took me basically 3 to 4 years to fully transition out of the agency. But I, was building that up in the background. And I will tell you that building an audience is harder than that. Like that's,
you heard it here first. Yeah.
it's very surprising. And one thing that's really been hitting me lately, I see that you've got the $100 million offers book behind you. Yeah. And I've been reading the new book, $100 million leads book.
Yeah, that's the one. I wish I could go back in time and get the hardback of offers just so that I could start to stack them, have that collection. I don't have offers, but I definitely got leads for sure.
Okay. So, that's what it looks purple because of the light, but okay. Got it.
Okay. Yeah.
So in that book, one of the things that he said, because everybody talks about content compounding. And I was like, okay, yeah, compounding, got it. And that made sense. And then in the book, he was like, it's actually not the content that compounds, it's the audience, excuse me. And I was like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, everything else, some of the areas that I was stuck on, all of a sudden started to make more sense, So
explain that breakthrough a little bit more. What does that actually mean? Content compounding, what you thought it meant, to the audience compounding. Break that down into super explain it to a third grader kind of thing.
Yeah. So when you post what do we call it? Well, I'm just going to call it a tweet. You post a tweet. Yeah. Okay. So I'll break it down to a third grader level, and then I'll go into the actual math and stuff behind it too. So you put a post on X or Instagram, and what happens is if you had a chart, it goes and then drops off and tapers out, right?
Right.
Within a day, right? And it's okay, so that, how can you make a case for that content is compounding? Because it's not, right? You have to do that every day. But what's interesting is if you do that every day, those spikes will get higher and higher and higher. And that's not because the content is compounding. The content is attracting an audience, and the audience is compounding.
Yes.
It's like what Justin Welsh says, the frequency of content increases your luck surface area.
Yeah.
Right. And so you get people who watched it, they liked it, they've now seen you, now they see another video or another post, they like that, they've seen you, and that's what builds. Right. Mm-hmm. Now the exception to that, which I think is what throws people off, is YouTube. So if you post something on YouTube, we've seen the chart where it doesn't go like this, it's really slow, and then it can kind of hockey stick.
Sure.
Right. So people are like, oh, it's the content that's compounding. Well, that's not actually the case, because what you're tracking is views. And so what does that mean? You're tracking audience. And the reason that the patterns work differently is it's because YouTube is at its core a search, right? So it's being put in front of you in a feed based on what you've been interested in the past, or it's, being searched, which means that it can compound and index higher based on searches over time. Any type of platform that has a news feed that goes from top to, or you scroll up and go down the feed, it's that action, that going down the feed, is what makes it so that a video will take off and then dip down, right? If Facebook built Facebook and Instagram on more of a search function than what it had, and it had a page where, just like YouTube, you come in and you see different videos, then it would also build. But because it has a vertical feed, that's why it does the jump, right? Yeah, so that's the reasoning behind it. So to me, understanding that what I'm trying to build is the audience, not the content, for some reason that just made it click that it's okay, it's different different metrics, like impressions and reach and engagement are what I really need to be focused on. And, followers do have importance in that more than, okay, it's all about the best content in the world. It's not about the best content in the world. It's about a balance between quality content that stands out to your market and building that market, So
absolutely,
that was kind of the revelation to me.
And so you've been applying this obviously into what you're doing. And again, that's what makes it easy for people like you and I to have conversation around the topic of content marketing as a whole, but more specifically into organic on the social platforms, because this whole concept, this whole topic applies to all business and it can help everybody. So what has it been that you've been doing lately on the content creation side that is helping you the most with the audience building? Or like, what are some of the things that you're learning that you're definitely going to stick with because you're seeing some sort of proof in that pudding, so to speak?
Yeah. The biggest thing about audience building, so a couple lessons in the beginning from what I've learned so far, and I'm still in my infancy of this, is there does not seem to be shortcuts that work. There are shortcuts. They do not work as well. I think that sometimes you'll see these accounts, like you and I both, we met on X and we engage a lot on X. And, you see these accounts who will have like 50 to 60,000, 70,000 followers, right? And they'll put a post out and they'll get like 2 or 3 comments, right? And you and I have less followers than that. We get more likes and comments. And so to me, what that tells me is that it's not necessarily about the following. But then you see a creator like Dan Coe or Justin Welsh, and they've got many more followers, right? But they do a post and in 1 minute, it gets 50 comments, right?
Yeah.
Like you literally have people sitting there waiting for their post, right? And like what I think is the instance where the people have like 50 or 60,000 and they get very few comments is that they're not engaging their market for one. And I also think that they maybe bought their way in, as in like, when you could run follower campaigns on Twitter, I think that they just were running follower campaigns to get the followers. And I've done that. I'd say 500 of my followers came from ads, but those 500 followers never engage.
Right.
Like they haven't gone anywhere.
Well, I think it taps into something really important is just like the value of engagement. Like, because again, in the sea of data and all of the metrics that you can track and get swallowed up in so that you can find something like to be proud of yourself for, especially when you're just getting started, you're like, I don't care which metric it is, but just show me one that has like a green up arrow next to it.
Yeah, that's what I want to see right now.
Yeah, 100%. But if for anybody out there doing this, and you and I so much included in this conversation, is focusing on the value of what engagement actually means, because that is something that you can plant your flag in and put as your North Star, because it serves you in the short term, in the immediate. It serves you medium term, long term. It will continue to serve. And especially as you're putting out content and practicing the best methods of inviting engagement and sharing in a way that feels very genuine to other people, that you're out here to do your best in your own little way on behalf of the communities you aim to serve and the people you aim. And so that's really
it's about
focused
people.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about people. Like when you look at followers and you see these, I just pulled mine up right now. I don't have the biggest following, right? So I've got, as of right now, 1,982 followers. Okay?
Nice. Well, I've got to pull my profile up now too. So we can all feel, everybody, if this gets chopped up and posted, everybody can feel good about themselves.
Yeah, what I would love is to like okay, well, after this call, we got to talk about how to boost that the legit way.
We're working on it.
So, but there's this thread that I did this morning, and like, this is the power of organic to me. It's a small following, but so far, just from a couple hours, it's reached 6,000 people, organically. And it's far beyond my audience. And, I think that the reason for that is because my biggest takeaway right now from building an audience is that it's incredibly manual work. And it's this compounding of like the best followers, the best leads, the best connections, and everything have come from engaging with other people, like, and remembering that everybody on the platform are people, and that we're all posting content for a reason. And what is the number one thing that we want when we post content? Well, likes and shares and comments give us a little bit of a dopamine hit and give us a little bit of recognition. But the thing is, like, when we look at like you and I have developed a friendship since we've met. And when we look at how that started, it's like, it was just a natural chemistry, a natural relationship on a social media platform. And I think that's truly what people want, is people want connection, right? They want to be connected with other people. And I think that is the most important thing about building an audience, is remembering that those views and those likes and those followers are all people and humans that have feelings and emotions and desires and objectives. And Zig Ziglar said it best. He said, you can get everything you want out of life by helping more people get what they want. And so then the question becomes like, as I grow and as I scale, how do I continue to provide a really high level of value to those people? And I think that's where content comes in, right? The engagement is great. We can give them what they want, but listening to what they have to say and remembering that they're people and then giving them what they want through content is where, how you provide value at scale as you're building and continue to build the audience.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's so much value that can be exchanged through the organic content. And yeah, there's a difference between looking at your follower count and just looking at that number, and whether that makes you feel good or bad or whatever the number is and what your goals are. It's like, it's not about followers, it's about audience. And the distinction there is that often is either confused or just not recognized from the get by a lot of people trying to build an audience, is that number just needs to go up, because the higher the number, the better it is for me. And that's the flawed thinking of no, audience are people that care to see what you have to say in their feed, that look forward to it to a degree, that choose to turn notifications on, or they're on your email list and follow you on X and are subbed on YouTube, so that not only can they grab the content, but to support you. That's audience. And audience really comes from the perception of connection. And so the more, as the creator, as the person that's the first one to, so to say, when you're putting a piece of content out there, the more that you recognize exactly what you said, that these are real people with all of their dreams, desires, problems, everything combined. And, good days, bad days, times when we feel like we're the king of the world and pounding on our chest like we figured some shit out, versus the very next day or week where you're like, you know what, I think I'm going to trash the business because... And, I'm moving on because clearly I suck.
The worst week of my life.
Dude, we waver like that. I
had a week like that last week, actually.
Me too, man. Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's what, because we were DMing back and forth a little bit, and you're like, hey, man, crazy week. And I was like, no sweat, brother.
I get you.
But that's the thing. And from connection itself, when people, especially followers, so engaged followers, people that are actually part of your audience, they don't you don't know them because you're the creator. You aim to try to know as many as you can, and that's why you stay active in the comments sections and all of that good stuff where you can interact and engage. Maybe throw some Q&As together, invite people to drop questions on an IG story or whatever it may be. But if you can help people perceive that you care about them, because you genuinely do, that will show through in the content if you do care about people. And so that's a pretty easy switch to make. But then again, those that are getting started, which is most people out here, or I'll also lump in for those that aren't where they want to be yet in their growth journey, whatever the metrics is that count for success for them. It's hard to stick to the plan on something that is, even if it's a hockey stick looking curve up ahead, when does it start to shoot up? When does that happen? There's no guarantees on that. And so with that, a lot of people, especially if they find themselves in a either real or artificial, maybe it's just mind games in themselves, like a feast or famine, like they feel, I got to make this thing work. I got to make this thing work for whatever reason it is that they feel that way. You start to see a lot of crummy execution because people just feel like they need to see that growth sooner than later, which I totally get. It just, you start to see the short-sighted tactics. And I think in a lot of cases, it's usually, because I like to think that most people are generally good. Like my kid asked me the other day, last night, I was getting him into the shower and he said, so if there's good guys, there's bad guys, right? So bad people and good people. And I said, well, bud, I think people are people, but some people make more good decisions than bad decisions, while others tend to make more bad decisions than good decisions. Or they'll make a bad decision that's so bad that it sticks with them for a while. Now,
Yeah.
and he's young enough to where I'm like, okay, I can't really, we could get
Can't
really
go deeper than
philosophical. We
that.
could start talking
Yeah.
about like the, human experience and the, exactly. All right, kids, here we go. Bedtime story. No, but like with that in mind, I think that there's a lot of, I'll just say, good people that just don't know better, that are just taking the advice of whatever popped up in their feed the first, or whoever seems to have grown their X account the fastest. Like if that's their goal, that's the person they're going to listen to. Because why would you go listen to Gary Vee say, get ready for 15 years? And if you're not, it's not going to happen. Not in the way that you're hoping. Like you think I happened overnight. And they say it takes a lifetime to have overnight success, because nothing truly is really overnight in a genuine way. Like it doesn't work that way. But and so that's where like I really try to model it the best that I can in how I present myself online. And I know it's a slow, and I'm okay with that to a degree. Now, I would love to increase the rate, and I'll do anything that I can that works within my workflows or within the time and financial constraints that I have to make those things better.
I think that it's the way it works is very contrary to what people think. It's like, I think for me, like one of the realizations was like, okay, this is the only thing that I don't want to do is XYZ. And it's like, oh, okay, well, to build an audience, like that's the only thing you actually have to do. And it's like, dang it,
Yeah. Well, for me, I've found just like, I think we talked about this last time, but like my mantra lately to myself, because for long, ever since like in technically I think it was early 2020, but right in that window when I jumped from my W-2 position into full-time solo biz and like, hey, we're going to make it happen. And at the time it was email marketing freelancing. It's the whole journey has been, okay, once I decided that I wanted to stay solo and keep the business small, lean and mean, rather than like an agency model and you start bringing on employees and all that stuff, I was like, okay, automation, like, and if I have a VA, how can I delegate? How can I use tech, AI, all of these things to build high leverage into this so that I'm not actually doing literally everything, on the day to day. And with that mentality, there was something flawed in that. Although, there's a lot of merit in it, it's nice to have that type of intention. I made that such a blanket focus to create automations and delegation into my systems as much as possible that I negated and really chose to turn a blind eye to what actually matters. And that is doing the unscalable, especially at the beginning while you can. And there's a way to have your cake and eat it too. And that's what I'm working on internally and with my business and the processes and everything that I choose to focus on or not focus on. It's how do we balance where leverage can really come in to help you out so that you have more time to do the things that actually move the needle. And for most people, the asset really is your network. It is your audience. It is people. It is connection. It is friendships. It is clients. It is other people, that maybe you would once think, oh, competition. It's like, no, put your heads together. Learn from each other. There's plenty of room for everybody.
Work
is
together, because you can go, it always makes me think of when my dad and I, when I was like in my teen years, like 14 to 16 or 13 to 16, whatever it was, my dad and I would go do these fly-in fishing trips up in Canada. So we would like go fly in for a week, right? You're the only one on the lake, and they just like, they fly you in, they land on the lake with the plane, which is super cool. And then they like drop you off at this cabin, right? And at the lake, like they have several boats and they have a bunch of fuel and they have a bunch of motors, right? Because they only check on you one time. They like come back halfway through the week and they're like, are you alive? And you're like, yes. And they're like, okay, great. See you later.
Like equally exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, it was really cool. But it was like, if you broke your arm, like you're stuck there for 3 days until they come back, and you better hope that you don't break your arm immediately after they leave, And so they're like, they would have a bunch of like additional supplies so that you could still fish and everything. So they'd have the boats, and on the boats, right, what my dad and I would do is we would take one boat and we would take two motors and put both motors on one boat. And when you this was like just like a lifelong lesson that stuck with me. Like when you put two motors on the boat, it doesn't go twice as fast as a boat with one motor, it goes about 3 times as fast, because you get this, you have the propellers and then you have the cavitation that happens between the propellers, and it acts like a jet propulsion. And I looked into that and I found that like that, I was like, why is that? Like, it's so weird how much faster it is. And apparently that happens pretty frequently in nature. Like, there's a similar thing. Again, it's not the exact equation, but like when they put 2 horses together to pull a carriage, they also go about 3 times as fast because they feed off of each other. And it's really common. And that's always stuck with me in business, is it's like, it's so much better to work with people, and where you truly can, like, don't straight up like go to your competition and open, like somebody who's just a direct competitor, and open trade secrets to them. Yeah. But I mean, aside from that situation, I mean, if we look at, what we talked about when I started my agency, I mean, I sacrificed the service of web development, and I went out and I worked with web developers, and it made them look better to their clients, because the one thing that they want after they build a site is they want people to go to the site. Right. And so I was able to do that. And how do you get them there? Well, ads, here's the guy, so it's like, there's just always more benefit, I feel, in finding ways to work together, when possible.
Absolutely. So, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it reminds me, I don't even remember specifically what the topic of the entry was, but in my weekly newsletter blog, which feeds my weekly podcast, which it's like the pillar of everything, all content. It's been almost a year since I wrote this, but I remember as you were saying that, I made this point and I said, when you're talking about people, 1 + 1 = greater than 2. And just that like math equation was something that, for me, it resonated in my brain. So, I articulated that. And so obviously it was still back there in the archive somewhere, because that came back, but it's true. I mean, and there's also that, I was just thinking about this yesterday. You hear people say, and I can't say this from experience because I haven't done both but they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, work with others. And I think there's a lot of truth to that from what I can tell, but I've worked alone, and I've only I've only gotten so far so fast. Mm-hmm. And I ask myself I reflect looking backwards just enough so that I can use that to leverage and move forward better. So I'm not getting caught up in my past, but I'm like, well, what if I had more counsel, more community, more coaching, more all of those things? I'm thinking of more C words that would work. But it's like, if I would have had more of that and not tried to be so solo, I think I would have gone faster. In fact, I'm pretty darn certain that I would have. So there is a bit of a flaw that's not like a full like scientific law that you can like, nail up to the wall and never change it. Like, it depends on what we're talking about. But in general, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, if you want to find purpose, if you want fulfillment, if you want to have more good weeks than bad weeks overall, with the aim that you have in business and just how you feel internally through that process, people is the ticket. Like, that's the secret sauce to all of it. And we're in a beautiful time where we're hyper connected. I like to say, with anybody. Like, we're too connected, almost to the point where we get in our own way. And we don't know which stuff on the feed to pay attention to or not. And it kind of circles back to that, But the essence of it all, like boiling down to fundamentals, it's like, focus on people and allow yourself, do the rest of the world a service by putting yourself out there, because your story, your opinions, your feelings, the things that the things that you're working on learning, the questions that you have, you're doing a disservice by not showing up online for people to be able to piggyback off of. Because it's like, you can hear the same advice given 100 times, but it's on that 101st time said by this person, minus all of the other people, that it finally stuck. So like for you, the life principle of like the boat motors, like that's the thing for you that reminds you of that principle. For me, it's the 1 + 1 = greater than 2, So it's everybody has their flavor,
Yeah. So I think the solopreneur business movement is fantastic. Like, I would say like right now, Justin Welsh is probably my favorite creator by far online. I love his content and I like his way of thinking, and I've, been able to have some interactions with him, and I think he's just a really good guy. He's a really nice guy. I think that what people don't see is how collaborative he is as an individual. And like, he is a solopreneur, but he JVs with people, right? Like, there's a couple people, like if you look back on some of his pictures, like he's taking pictures with people that he's met and grown with on X, formerly Twitter, and they're like connecting in person now.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like you can have a solo business, but if you're going to do that, you still need people. You just don't need them to be stakeholders, right, in your company. You know, you just need to find what are the things that I have that they don't have and they need, and what are the things that they have that I don't have and I need. And it's that yin and yang duality and balance that exists. And I'm going to go really sciencey nerdy on you for a minute because I've really like dug in on this principle. Another thing that kind of laid the foundation for that viewpoint of partnerships and JVs was my grandpa would always say, he's like, you don't need a he was my business mentor. He'd say, you don't need a partner who can tell you something you already know or who has something you already have. He said, so if you don't have money, but you have skill, you need a partner who has money. If you do have money, but no skill, you need a partner that has skills. He said, what you don't want is a partnership with two people who have skills, but no resources, or money, but no skills. And I've always viewed business that way. I'm trying to see if I've been working on creating more like frameworks to describe things simply, but I don't have these all digitized yet. And are you familiar? So the sciencey part of this is like, do you know the company? It's Musk's company. Can't say his name. It's the Neuralink company, the chips in people's brains. So that logo, there's a ton of meaning in that logo. So the logo of it is like it's a straight line and it's a dip down and then a bigger dip up. And I was like, what is that a chart of? And it's asymmetrical. So like the dip down is lower. It's like a smaller dip than it is big. Right. And apparently what that logo stems from is something that's called action potential, which is like a measurement of like neurons in the brain, of like how much potential energy gets sent between neurons. And I was like, that's interesting because I think that the same thing happens in life and business is like people who are the most successful, they find like the little things that they do, that those things like have a much bigger potential. They have a much bigger reward. Right? Like we all have 24 hours in our day. Why are some people billionaires and some people can barely get by? It's not about the time. It's about what you do in that time. Right? And so I'm struggling to find it. I wish I could find it right now, but I'll show you later. But I created this chart that basically takes like that action potential principle and puts something between it to show like when you put these things together, right? It creates this, you put these two forces together and it creates this unknown variable, right? That just amplifies everything, right? Yeah. Like a feedback loop when you put a microphone too close to a speaker, know, and it's really fascinating to me because that's been like a core principle that I've always operated on in business for my entire career. And I think that's my other motivation for doing things with this audience building is it's like my largest client ever came from somebody that I connected with and did business with through a Facebook group. My largest acquisition came from somebody that I met through somebody else that was just an acquaintance. So like the largest acquisition, one of my best partnerships to date was I did a webinar on ads. A guy attended the webinar. He told everybody in the company about the webinar, unbeknownst to me. One of the high ups in that company was very interested. The owner of that company ended up dying. And when that happened, that guy came to me. I didn't know him from Adam, right? But it came through this connection that was like a really convoluted connection. It was really weird to be able to trace that out because I was like, where'd you come from? Yeah. And he's actually my business partner, in my equity company to this day. Yeah. And so it's really funny. It's like what I need more happy accidents. I need more things that can happen. I'm not a big evolution guy, but I like movies. I love the movie Interstellar. Yeah. And so there's that scene, it's a great movie. So there's that scene in Interstellar where they're by the black hole and they're talking about like that one world that's by the black hole. And they're like, there's just no chance, right? And Anne Hathaway makes a statement. She's like, accidents are the building blocks of evolution. And when you're that close to a black hole, she's like, not enough things can happen to have enough accidents to be able to produce opportunity. And so I'm not an evolution guy personally, but that principle is there is like when you have these connections in the social media and all these, things that are happening and the content that you're putting out, you're creating opportunities for accidents to happen.
Yeah, it's back to that luck surface area concept as well.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
If you enjoyed this episode, there's plenty more content on this channel ready for you right now. If you're catching this on YouTube, consider dropping a like and be sure to hit the subscribe button before you leave, because that simple action exponentially helps this channel grow. I value your time and attention, so thank you for sticking around. You're the best. And until next time, peace.